Hello, Port Macquarie. Well, first of all, I have some disappointing news. I was supposed to be coming to Port Macquarie in early April. So, in lieu of not being able there, we're going to make this videotape, a special videotape for Port Macquarie. And I want to respond to an article that appeared in the Sydney Morning Herald on March the 15th, just a few days ago, in a subsection called Poison. I start with this quote. Port Macquarie Hastings Council will consider on Wednesday whether to proceed with a vote at the next council election in September to remove fluoride from the water supply, from its water supply. And it goes on under the subheading Poison. Mayor Peter Pinson last month told council her research and meetings with anti-fluoride campaigners over the years had convinced her that fluoride is a poison. Her deputy mayor, Lisa Interman, who I know, is a long-time campaigner to have fluoride removed. New South Wales AMA president, Dr. Keen Sang Lim, said he would, quote, be very disturbed to see the health of the population being used as a political playing card, unquote. Dr. Lin said if Port Macquarie Hastings decided to hold a popular vote, the AMA, the Australian Medical Association, would be advocating for good evidence-based public health measures to remain in place. It would be a shame, Dr. Lin said, to see a populist view override what is clear scientific evidence. Fluoride works. It reduces the rate of tooth decay and reduces cost, and it is safe. This is astonishing. Dr. Lim, this is unconscionable what you've said here. It's unprofessional. You are telling the world that you are at least 3 years out of date on your knowledge of the scientific literature. If you knew that scientific literature, you would see it's you that's playing political football with the science, not the citizens. The citizens are actually carrying the truth to the public and to the politicians on this. Let me explain. When I say you're out of date, you are obviously unaware. If you're saying that fluoridation is safe, you're unaware that since September 2017, we've had major scientific studies published in major journals by American and Canadian and Mexican researchers, which shows that fluoride is neurotoxic. Don't even have to bother with a word like poison. Fluoride appears to damage the infant and fetal brain, causing not only lowered IQ, but also an increase in the prevalence of ADHD. You need, Dr. Lim, to read this literature before you open your mouth again in public. And the politicians need to get this information. We've summarized it on one page that you can get from our website, the fluoridealert.org, a one-pager on the neuro-toxicity of fluoride, and that same page is available on the website of fluoridefreeaustralia.org, fluoridefreeaustralia.org. Now, let me just give you a few more details on those studies, because these are bombshell studies. These are game changers as far as this fluoridation debate. I'm not even going to get into the business of whether swallowing fluoride actually reduces by a small percentage tooth decay in young children. You don't have to get to that unless you believe that protecting children's teeth is far more important than protecting their brains, and I don't think that many parents believe that. So the first study done by Bashash was a US government-funded study. It took 12 years. It was conducted by researchers from the University of Toronto, McGill, Indiana, Illinois, Harvard, and Mount Sinai, and an institute in Mexico. It was done in Mexico City, and they found a strong correlation between the exposure to a woman during pregnancy as measured by the fluoride levels in her urine, which is a measure of total exposure to fluoride regardless of source, and lowered IQ in their offspring. These were based upon individual measurements. individual measurements in the mother and individual measurements of IQ in the offspring, individual based pairs, the mother and the appropriate offspring, both measured. A very strong study indeed. They controlled for all the confounding variables. And you can imagine, I think you can assume, because this is funded by the National Institute of Health, they had to make sure that the whole methodology was very sound. The second paper was by Green, Rivka Green. It was published in 2019 in JAMA Pediatrics, one of the leading journals of pediatrics in the world. And they essentially replicated Bashash with one exception, that the IQ, the lowering of IQ only occurred in the boys, not the girls. But other measurements of exposure to the mothers, like the amount of fluoride that ingested, showed a correlation with both boys and girls. But this was published in JAMA Pediatrics. It received very large media coverage. And it was also that the editors of the journal knew that this was controversial, so they made sure that it was peer-reviewed in spades. They looked at the statistical analysis more than once, and they attached an editorial in the journal issue, an editorial explaining how controversial the subject is and how meticulous they were about that peer review. They had an accompanied editorial from David Bellinger, who's one of the world's leading neurotoxicologists, explaining essentially that fluoride poses as much risk as lead does to lowering of IQ in children. That's a devastating statement if you think about it. And lastly, the issue was accompanied by a podcast between the overall editor of JAMA and the editor of JAMA Pediatrics specifically, and you can go to that podcast, you can hear that podcast, but in a nutshell, they explained how shocked they were by this study, that they, along with many other scientists, believed that fluoridation was a good thing, that there was no evidence of harm, and the fact that it was actually had the potential to lower children's IQ was shocking to them. And they concluded their interview, one of them actually said, if my wife was pregnant at this point, I would advise her to avoid fluoridated water. So 2 bombshells. Now we got 2 more. A study published in 2019 by Riddle found that the prevalence of ADHD in Canada was about 3 times higher in fluoridated communities than non-fluoridated communities. That is devastating. That means that exposure to fluoride may be the most significant cause of ADHD in Canada. Are you listening, AMA? Are you listening? 3 times the prevalence of ADHD in fluoridated communities? That's not all. Then there's another study done by Till, published this year, 2020. Another Canadian study. And Till showed that a linkage between the difference in children who are bottle-fed in fluoridated communities and children who are bottle-fed in non-fluoridated communities in Canada had a lowering of about 9 IQ points, a difference of 9 IQ points between children who were bottle-fed using fluoridated tap water to make up the formula and non-fluoridated water to make up formula. In a fluoridated Canada, which fluoridates a slightly lower level than Australia. There's science on the table, and darn good science, the best science that's ever been undertaken on the fluoridation issue, and it was done in fluoridated communities. It was done in Canada. They are right, and the Australian Medical Association are wrong, and they're being unprofessional and unconscionable to actually continue promoting this wretched practice. It's time to end it. Thank you.